Good evening once again. Business Standard today broke the story that RBI Deputy Governor Viral Acharya had quit a few weeks ago. Within hours, RBI had to release a statement confirming this news. In fact, the Reserve Bank of India statement went on to say that the letter was under consideration. Well, for many, this move wasn't really surprising. But to understand that, let's rewind to what began as a very public display of a rift between few of the governors and directors in deputy governors within the RBI and the government. Let's rewind to October 2018. Governments that don't respect central bank independence will sooner or later incur the wrath of financial markets, ignite economic fire, and come to rue the day they undermined an important regulatory institution, said Viral Acharya in a speech in October 2018. In this elaborate speech, he then went on to give several reasons why central bank needs to be independent, and he took a strong stand against government interference. Viral Acharya, known to be a close aide of Urjit Patel, who himself resigned prematurely in December 2018. That Viral Acharya is known to have disagreed with RBI and government on various issues, on the fiscal deficit and the path followed there with the interest rate levels, on how to deal with troubled banks, and whether the government should put in more money, on the overall corrective action that the banks must follow. The differences became more and more apparent in the last few months. In February and then April 2019, Deputy Governor Viral Acharya even dissented with the RBI's decision on interest rates. So for many, it's not really a surprise that Viral Acharya finally decided maybe to go back to academics. But the bigger point is, Raghuram Rajan, Urjit Patel and now Viral Acharya, all sudden exits, two of them premature. Is this a cause for concern? Does it send the wrong message to the global community? That's the big debate. Let's say good evening to our panelists. Mohan Guruswamy, Senior Economist and Chairman at the Center for Policy Alternatives. Abhishek Mishra, representative of the BJP. Professor Aman Agarwal, Director at the Indian Institute of Finance. Ashwini Mahajan, co-convener of Swadeshi Jagran Manch, who's also been very vocal about his views on this issue. But first up, and of course, I also have M.K. Venugopal, founding editor of The Wire. But first up, I want to go across to Tamar Bandyopadhyay, author and consulting editor for Business Standard. Mr. Bandyopadhyay, what really happened here? Are people reading too much into the decision of Viral Acharya? Or did the disagreements and did the rift really play a factor in this decision of his?
No, I think you have already explained what's the context. So I guess the writing was on the wall and there is no surprise. There have been talks, I have heard people talking about Viral Acharya being extra hawkish, and in the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, his stance was very different from the governor, where governor was going for red card, Viral was resisting and saying no. Finally, of course, he said yes, both to red card, and the stance change in the June policy. People are speculating that probably that has contributed to this, but I guess no, that's not the cause. I think it is bound to happen because it is both Dr. Acharya and Urjit Patel. They were defending, if I may say so, at that point of time when RBI's independence or the so-called independence was under attack. And Dr. Acharya, you spoke about this, his Eddie Schrock Memorial Lecture in October, where he spoke about this, if you don't care for the independence of the central bank, you will invoke the wrath of the market. Before that, a few weeks before that, in his own alma mater, IIT Mumbai, he spoke about how he strongly defended the PCA framework, which the government was very critical about. So I think he had all along been doing that. And you remember after his AD Memorial speech, Schropp speech, a finance ministry senior official tweeted sort of very sarcastic tweet that rupee is up and bond
Yes.
yield down. So where is the wrath of market? So
Yes.
clearly there was a disconnect between the government and the Reserve Bank of India. So and the governor, of course, cited his personal reasons to quit, and Dr. Acharya also has given his personal reasons to quit. But I would like to believe that probably he was not comfortable, and he came on a lien, 3-year lien. So the choice was clearly whether you'll hold on to it till next year and join in spring, resume his academic persuasion, or he could cut short and join in August. So he has cut it short by 6 months. So that's it. I don't read too much into it.
Right. But
If you
were you
ask me at a
surprised,
personal level, I was expecting.
Mr.
I think
Bandyopadhyay, were you
the
surprised
governor,
that he...
you have a stable, now you have, governor
Yes.
has spent few months and a new government is in place. So it's the ideal time to go.
Were you surprised that he actually stayed on for 8 months? Because, you know, many believe that along with the exit of Urjit and before that, because of the speech he made, that Viral Acharya would go back then itself. The fact is that since then he worked on for the next 6-8 months. He worked with the government, he worked on the policy planning, and it's only now that he's made this decision.
Is the question for me?
Yes, it is.
No, I said I said any sensible person would give some time to, no. So a new governor has taken over, and the elections round the corner. So I think he waited for a new government to come in and a governor to settle down. Now you go back to 2009, of course under different circumstances, when then Deputy Governor Rakesh Mohan quit, because he was a strong contender for the governor's position when Dr. Reddy's term came to an end in September 2008, and Subba Rao came in, parachuted from Finance Ministry directly to the Reserve Bank of India. Now Rakesh Mohan was definitely not happy, but had he quit in September, October? No. He waited for a few months to governor to settle down. That was post Lehman crisis, and then he went back to he went for his academic pursuits. So I would like to believe anybody sensible and responsible who cares for public policy would not take a decision in a half. So
Okay.
that's what he has done.
Okay,
It was
point taken
coming,
there.
it was expected, and I think he has timed it because probably he wanted to go back in August.
Okay, point well taken there. Mr. M.K. Venugopal, let me come to you next as to how you view this. Fact of the matter is that, some of the statements made by Viral Acharya were very, very clear in how he saw the equation between RBI and the government. Back in October 2018, he made that very fiery speech that led to a massive controversy. He then went on to work in the RBI for so many months. He dissented on RBI's decisions for interest rate cuts and still continued. There clearly wasn't any visible effort by the government to push him out, despite the fact that he was taking a contrarian position constantly. Then should this be seen as a concern, or should this be seen as a big worry that he has now walked away?
See, my view is that he had taken a very strong stand last year when the government was very eager to take money out of the RBI contingency reserves. In fact, there was a move to not only to take away reserves which which are accumulated from the RBI profit, but also the other reserves, which revaluation reserves, which accumulate on account of revaluation of gold, foreign exchange, etc. Now, such a move had never happened before, and the centre was so eager that it invoked an unprecedented clause to do it. But later, of course, they withdrew. But with that began the resetting of the relationship between centre and RBI, and Urjit took a stand. And along with Urjit, he also took a stand, and he made a speech which later he said was after consulting Urjit Patel, where he very clearly said that the way the centre was interfering with the RBI, and he compared the situation with with Argentina, where also an authoritarian political regime tried to take money out of the central bank there, and there was a big chaos in the markets. There was a run on the Argentine currency, capital flight. Therefore, after having taken such a strong stand, my sense was that he would have quit anyway. After Urjit Patel left in December, he would have quit. But I think he was persuaded to stay back so that it didn't seem like there was an exodus from the RBI top brass. And I guess he was responsible enough to continue for a while. But in my view, it was a foregone conclusion. And in the backdrop, it's very clear that the Modi regime wanted to have a completely different kind of relationship with the central bank, as opposed to in the past. In the past also, the finance ministers have had problems with the Reserve Bank governor. I remember Dr. Reddy had problems with Mr. P. Chidambaram, who was the finance minister. Later, Mr. Chidambaram also had issues with Subbarao, but they somehow resolved their differences. There was a very it's always a relationship of tension, but it never keeled over in the way it seemed to do under the BJP regime. And I think it's not a good sign. The RBI is seen as a global institution, in the sense a lot of foreign investors look at how the central bank independence or credibility is retained or maintained. Now, after Shaktikanta Das, of course, taking over, there is some semblance of stability, but I sometimes worry whether this is a lull before the storm, because there's a Jalan committee which is going into the same issue on the centre wanting to take away RBI's reserves to meet many of its other needs, welfare programs or bank recapitalization needs. Now, these are things which have not happened before, so we'll have to wait and see how it pans out.
Mishra, do you want to come in here and respond to what two of our panelists have said? Fact of the matter is, Abhishek, these were people, at least two of these three, Urjit Patel and Viral Acharya, who were appointed by this very government, and they have chosen to walk away before their tenure ended.
See, Tanvi, you have to understand three things in perspective here. Firstly, that Mr. Viral Acharya has quit citing personal reasons. So he, the gentleman, has quit citing personal reason. RBI is an independent body. Government has nothing to do with that. The person himself is quitting due to personal reasons. Secondly, as everybody knows, he has made a speech 8 months back. So if there was any pressure, any kind of stress upon him by government, so he would have resigned himself. So he's quitting due to personal reason. He is a person of academic bent of mind. He wants to go and pursue that in some other country. Secondly, he had given a speech 8 months back. Still he has continued. And our government was the one which had appointed these people. So we appoint people of merit, and then they are free if they feel if somebody wants to resign due to personal reason, he wants to go abroad and for academic concerns, he gave a speech, still he was continuing happily. So you have to understand, it's purely a personal choice of an individual who wants to go abroad to pursue his academic interests.
Well, one would hope that you don't keep picking up such people who then, if it's just for personal interest, who just, don't finish the work and quit halfway through and go. Because take a look at what he was in charge of. Viral Acharya was in charge of the Financial Stability Unit, the Monetary Policy Department, Department of Economic and Policy Research, Financial Markets Operation Department, Financial Market Regulation Department. So the portfolios and the responsibilities that were given to him were very, very crucial. And if the government keeps picking up, Abhishek Mishra, people who don't think this is important enough for personal reasons, that repeatedly can become a problem. Once or twice, of course, is understandable if that is indeed the reason. Let me take it across to Mr. Mohan Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy.
Tanvi.
Yes. No, I take your point.
I just one line. Tanvi, one line. Government is a stable institution. RBI is a stable institution. Somebody resigns due to personal reason. It does not. It's okay. The system moves on. RBI is a strong institution. It's independent, autonomous.
Okay, let me take your point across to Mr. Mohan Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, Abhishek Mishra says, and that's the response many are also giving us, that he made that speech and he became took a vocal stand against the government in October 2018. If for these many months he was allowed to still continue, you can't really blame the government for his decision today.
Tanvi, before I get into the bigger aspects of the conflict, I'd say this, that anybody who has a tenured professorship in an American university, which is probably the best job you can have in the world, which is lifelong, paid, highly paid job, doesn't sacrifice the tenure because you lose tenure after 3 years. So whoever comes leaving behind a tenure track, you must be sure that he's not going to stay for more than 3 years. And that I have issues with that because, it affects continuity, it affects long-term policy, attitudes and all that in the jobs you take. And these people come to critical jobs. So if you look at the track of these foreign professors, they can't stay long because, we can't keep them long with the same kind of inducements and money and status and prestige they get as tenured professors. Viral Acharya is a tenured professor. Raghuram Rajan is a tenured professor. Now, so it's very difficult for them to have stayed on for more than 3 years. So to see reasons, I could see the personal reasons coming in any case. But there are issues here. There's a tension between the RBI and the Ministry of Finance, the Government of India. The RBI is seen as, a source of easy money because, if it loosens the credit deposit ratios, if it loosens tight money restrictions, reduces interest rates, the government will have more money to spend, government will have more money to borrow. And as this Modi government's borrowing went up from 41% of GDP to 88% of GDP in 5 years. So it's been borrowing money left and right. And it needs loose money policies. And then you've got people like Gurumurthy there in the RBI board who says that, companies like IIF and FS and, the other NBFCs can be got a mismatch of money. They have a problem between long-term investments and short-term deposits. So they need to be rectified. And therefore, which means that, our banks are more flexible with giving them money. And banks, one reason why the NBFCs went into crisis, the banks cut short because they said, you're not credit-worthy anymore. And now, so basically they want the RBI to toe that line. And that is where, tight monetary policy plays a role. If you are very loose and fast with the money, then you give money to these people and, blow it up. Well, the decision for the government to take is hard economic choices. What are you going to do about subsidies? What are you going to do about public sector losses? They have not touched any of that. Public sector losses kept mounting. The BSNL now has made a loss of 35,000 crores in the tenure of this government. Air India has now 43,000 crores down. So like that, it's just piling on. The centrally administered public sector undertakings take out the administered priced units like the oil companies, lose over 1 lakh crores a year. They have not done anything about it. Subsidies have gone up in their tenure, and most of the subsidies are unmerited subsidies, which goes to large farmers, write-off loans to large farmers. And so, so where is economic policy?
Right.
It's just assuaging, throwing good money for bad reasons. And they want more of this money. And they think that somehow the government has a right to do whatever it wants with the money. And that is where the tension is. So that's where people like Viral Acharya took positions, said that you can't do this. You can't do this all the time. You can do it sometime. That's where even when the banks were writing off, the government was writing off farmer loans, Raghuram Rajan said, the states must pay for it.
Right.
The RBI will not pay for it. You write off a loan, you pay for it. So they have problems with all these issues. The Modi government has written off something like 83,000 crores in this tenure of farm loans. And all this goes to farmers who have collateral to borrow money, which means they are big farmers. So how does it benefit the guy without land? How does it give jobs to them? Now, these are issues which are large political issues which the government will take a position in. And one way of taking a position is with the RBI taking positions on this, saying that there is no easy money. And that is where the conflict is. That's where the tussle is. And the government is riding roughshod. Now they've got all sorts of people in the RBI board. They've got a friendly person as the RBI governor, whose biggest contribution to monetary policy was during the demonetization, saying that you should have voter identification ink on the fingers of people who take more than 2,000 rupees. Absurd kind of ideas.
Right.
And you get rewarded with the RBI governorship, So we're in a remarkable state of affairs.
Okay, let me take that point across to Professor Aman Agarwal. Professor Agarwal, do you agree that while they may have been, this government's appointees, both Urjit and Viral Acharya, the fact of the matter is perhaps what the government expected from them, even they were uncomfortable with it. That is why they walked away. And is that a big concern? Or should you actually have people within the RBI who will perhaps work more easily and, are on the same page as the government all the time?
Tanvi, very important to be noticed is first of all that not only that RBI is fairly independent, but an RBI is a group of large number of people working to run the central bank and the monetary system in this country, which includes a set of governors, deputy governors, and then executive directors, and then a full staff which is there. First of all, so with each department being handled, like you mentioned, of the areas which is handling, so there are executive directors who actually implement that in terms of operations to do and look at those aspects. Secondly, when it comes to people's resignation, I was surprised when Urjit resigned as against Viral resigning at that stage, because it was important that what he had given as a message to the public. I remember when I was there at the World Bank 20 years back, and I was supposed to address a conference in Europe. I was called by my department director and asked as to what exactly the paper am I giving, and I must submit the full paper before, although that paper was already done a year and a half before joining the World Bank. But still I had to do that because then I was an employee of the World Bank and people were looking at me that an employee of the World Bank is speaking something. And this is where it needs to be understood. As a professor in academic institution, I have a different role to play. As a deputy governor, I have a different role to play. And comparing institutions, countries like Argentina and India is a fairly wrong example to set around the globe and sending a message to the world. So in fact, I was going to expect his resignation, on the other hand, which came as Urjit. But clearly what is understandable here is that there are certainly differences, and I find differences of opinions among group members is very critical, whether it's a family or an institution or the governments.
Okay.
They bring in new ideas, new thinking. But the problem of the differences was that the NPAs was curbing, the PCA which was introduced in the NPA framework was curbing and throttling the system, which Urjit and Viral were actually holding on to a great extent. And that was something which was curbing the growth of the country going forward. And we saw the inflation tightening to that level, which actually brought a curse to the Q4 as well. So in my opinion, there are certain things which we need to do, central banks need to do, and there have been differences of opinion, whether it is a Fed in the US or it is a Bank of England in the UK or the RBI or various other central banks which are around. Even Sweden, they have had differences. So there are differences of opinion. That doesn't mean that people start resigning or going forward just by sending resignations because there are differences of opinion.
No, exactly my point, Professor Agarwal, and that's the point. I just want to quickly take it back across to M.K. Venugopal. Ms. Venugopal, there have always been differences, like you also pointed out. The fact of the matter is, in these specific cases, the ones on the RBI side have chosen to walk away. Raghuram Rajan repeatedly raised the issue of autonomy and government interference. And when his first term ended, even before the government decided on the second part, he moved away. He had to go. Urjit Patel, who was a government choice and government appointee, he walked away, and so did Viral Acharya. Does it then send a message that perhaps the government needs to look at different kind of people to bring on and bring into the board of RBI? Maybe the academics, the so-called NRI imports are not the ones who will help bring in stability and cooperation between the RBI and government. Do you buy that logic?
Yeah. I agree that India has a lot of a lot of homegrown talent. So we should we should try out our homegrown talent. So. But then the Modi government, as you might have seen in their first tenure, they believed in getting imports, whether it was Niti Ayog, Arvind Panagaria from Columbia University, or whether it's Mr. Subramaniam, or whether it was Mr. Raghuram Rajan, Chicago University, or Viral Acharya. Now, to give you an example, one of our best RBI governors has been Dr. Venugopal Reddy. He was an IAS officer, but at the same time, he was also a trained economist and a very sharp man who actually who had seminal contribution to central banking, and after he finished his tenure, he got many awards around the world, and he is also credited with, in some ways, saving India from getting embroiled during the 2008 global financial crisis, in spite of persistent demand from foreign banks and other banks in India, private banks. He refused to allow banks to go into toxic, derivatives, housing derivatives, and other instruments which were circulating on Wall Street. Mind you, at that time, if the finance minister did not agree with him in the first place. So imagine if it were a Modi government at that time, very, very insistent that no, if they had overruled Venugopal Reddy and said no, Indian banks, private banks should be allowed to access, buy derivatives from the global markets. I mean, we would have been in a very bad situation. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is, have a good homegrown economist, but treat the institution with respect. Don't give the impression that nobody survives in this institution. Nobody finishes a full term. That sends a bad image all around the world, because RBI, mind you, it's a global institution. It's not like some domestic body, because the world sees the central bank, not only India's central bank, other central banks also, China or whoever, other emerging markets. They watch central banks very carefully in the way they conduct monetary policy, the way they control inflation, the way they control the money markets, etc. So I'm by all means, have a good homegrown economist. India can do very well without foreign imports, but my larger point is, treat them with respect. That's
right.
it.
Right. Well, Ashwini Mahajan also joins us now. Ashwini Mahajan, this is the point that you also raised about, the foreign imports, the NRIs who are constantly brought in, whether as a chief economic advisor or in the RBI. Don't we have enough talent here? But the fact also is, whether वो यहाँ के हो या बाहर से लाए गए हों, बाहर कहीं पढ़ा रहे हों, अगर हम उनको रिस्पेक्ट से और स्पेस नहीं देंगे अपना काम करने के लिए, तो कोई भी क्विट करके जाएगा ही.
कितना रिस्पेक्ट दिया सबको? We have seen enough, and my point has always been that we respect RBI as an institution. We respect even the people, those who have been imported from outside, but we also have to see their contribution. And in all these years, what we have seen is that there has been an over obsession about the inflation. I would like to ask these people in the RBI that so far all their expectations about the inflation have always been proved wrong. Even then, they have been insisting on not lowering down the rate of interest. There are many other instances as well. You have seen in case of the NPS, why so much of delayed response to the NPS? The RBI is an institution which knows more data, which has more data than anybody else. Then why NPAs were not dealt with properly? There are many other instances as well. What I have always been saying is that the RBI, we respect the institution, but that institution has to work in sync with the government also. When you don't pick up the phones of the finance minister, then what you are trying to tell? So this is a kind of situation where obviously the government has to take action. So, because they have included some more names in the board of directors, and then people start asking questions that why this name, why not this name. So as my other panelist was also saying, that we have enough talent in the country. Why? And this is the question we are asking even the Prime Minister and the government. Why don't you try and hunt people within the country those who know about the country, those who know how the inflation works, those who know how NPAs have been growing, those who know the ground realities. People come from outside, they don't have any understanding of the situation in the country. May it be other, we are talking about RBI today, but we know how Arvind Subramaniam was abusing the farmers. If you look at the economic survey, you will find he's saying that villages are a den of ignorance and the lawlessness and so on and so forth. So what kind of people we are importing? So this is also a basic question. So therefore, what I am saying is that we respect institutions, but institutions also have to behave properly.
Okay, interesting and a very vocal point there. So let me take that point across to Tamal Bandyopadhyay. Tamal, did you agree with what Mr. Mahajan was saying, that of late we've seen over obsession about the inflation levels with absolutely no understanding that perhaps on the interest rate level RBI needs to do more to help restart the economy?
Yeah, 2 points, Tanvi. One is, yes, I would like to believe that the data forecasting model which RBI has been following, it's not as strong as it should be. And over the last few MPC meetings, if you see that the inflation projections has always been gone wrong, and every subsequent meeting actually, the forecasting has been cut shorter than what it was in the previous MPC meeting. So every 2 months we are seeing this. So yes, the data forecasting model is not correct. But is this data forecasting model not correct because you are importing talent from outside? So I have a little 2 bits to contribute in this insider versus outsider contribution. I think we should be region agnostic. Should we take it from Eastern India, Western India, Northern India, or overseas, or US or UK or developed market? I don't think in the larger economics, when we talk about, in the world of economics, we don't really need to be that particular which region this person coming from, because we need a perspective to run a central bank, or for that matter in the economic world we need the bigger, the larger perspective is better. Whether it's homegrown or some US or UK university, it doesn't really matter. But I have one small contribution which you alluded to, and some of your, or few of your panelists also alluded to in a different way, about this academicians holding this position. I have nothing against academicians. I think they're intelligent, they're wise, and there's no question on their integrity and ethics. But what happened is this: not everyone is exactly familiar with administration. I think that's not a key to the problem, that's a contributing factor to the problem. So like Dr. Raghuram Rajan was an academician, but he has some kind of administrative experience because he came through North Black as the government chief economic advisor. Subsequently, Dr. Urjit Patel, he had his exposure to the corporate world, but I think administration bit, the way he functioned, probably he could have approached it a little different. And Dr. Acharya's case also, again, the same thing. I think that the lack of administrative ability, and on the other hand, the latest one, the Shaktikanta Das, he has an impeccable administrative ability, like consultative approach. Of course, you can always find fault that you are listening to too many people, maybe you get carried away, I don't know, and there's a pros and cons. But the question of listening to people, the question of academic acumen, taking everybody on board, that probably sometimes lacks with the academicians. And also, not all of them, and certainly Viral is not one of them, some of the academicians have a little bit of healthy cynicism about others' intellectual acumen. Viral is not the person, let me repeat that. So I think there are pluses and minuses. Like Dr. Reddy, again, his administrative capability was excellent, and he had series of fights with the ministry. In fact, one of the private conversation, he did say that it was larger than even Indo-China fights. That's the kind of thing. A finance ministry official told me that they used to consider Dr. Reddy like a gunda. He said he will bulldoze his way, but at the end of the day, you'd surrender because he knew that his intention is good. But he will go through the entire process of debate, etc., etc. Dr. Bimal Jalan is a very high-grade diplomat in the positive sense of the term. So taking people along with you, having through the consultative process, having your own mind, your own intelligence, your own wisdom, but also incorporating others' point of view, and that has come from your ability, capability of a good administrator. I think where the academicians, or most of the academicians, lack is the administrative capability. And in all these cases in the Reserve Bank of India, I would not question their wisdom, their sagacity, their intelligence, their integrity, but probably on the academic world, because they have, you can say, a kind of ideology. Because we are in the public place, we are in a public, for the public good. Like for instance, to give an example, Dr. Raghuram Rajan used to talk about why make in India, we should do make for India. So is it like Reserve Bank of India would definitely get upset if government talks about monetary policy, because RBI feels that it is the central bank's domain, government's domain is fisc. Similarly, government would get upset if Reserve Bank of India talk about fiscal areas and certain government policies. But an academician would probably think that, well, I am in a public policy space, I need to talk that. So the teacher in the person, the academician in the person probably overtakes the central banker. So that's the limited point I'm making.
Well, it's also interesting because you say, these are two different aspects, and one is the government's domain, the other is the RBI's domain. Of course, often we see, not just in this government's tenure, but earlier as well, that the government also, starts speaking about what the inflation policy or the interest rate policy should be. So both sides often tend to, wade into the other's territory. But Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, we have some viewers who are also trying to understand exactly what does this mean. And one viewer, in fact, has straight point blank asked, does this have an impact? Is it really bad for our economy? Just from a layman's perspective, does it really matter if Urjit Patel, leaves before his tenure ends, or Viral Acharya leaves before his tenure ends?
No, it does matter, because, the length of the tenure is very important. That's why I have problems with foreign professors, because they don't have length of tenure available to them. They come on 3 years, maximum 2 years, and then they go back. Now, our central bank chiefs all over the world have had long tenures. Look at in America, look at in Bank of England. They have long tenures, European Central Bank. They have long tenures and they own monetary policy. They look after the finances because they have a long-term perspective, 5 years, 6 years. Greenspan, I think, was there for 16 years. Now, our central bankers have not had that long tenure. And I certainly think you can get good economists with long-term commitments to the country. Like, Dr. Manmohan Singh came back after having been educated in Cambridge, and Dr. Rangarajan was an academician, but was outstandingly successful as the RBI governor. He was a deputy governor first. So you go through the ropes. You become a deputy governor, and then you go up, and then, you get familiar with things. Because any job, it takes you 6 months to get familiar with the institution. And some of these governors and some of these officials have not had the time to get familiar, and then they are ready to go. So that is my problem. The problem is not because they're well educated. They're superbly educated.
But what about the disagreements, Mr. Goswami, that they seem to have with what the government expects RBI?
You have to.
Yes, but what about the disagreements that they seem to have with the government's role and what the government wants, the policy to be as far as RBI is concerned?
Precisely. RBI cannot be the handmaiden of the government to do the government's bidding. RBI looks after monetary policy, looks after how money is spent, how money is used. It doesn't become, upset the markets. It doesn't, stoke inflation or doesn't stoke deflation. And we've seen all this happening because they've been playing ducks and drakes with monetary policy. And therefore, continuity is very important. Long tenures are important. And central banks have always been one step away from government. You can't say, I am the government, I got elected and I've got 400 seats, so I can do whatever I want. And this has been the tendency of all governments. Congress government, BJP government, whoever it is, to dictate terms to the RBI. And we've had a history of RBI governors going before the tenure was over.
Right.
This is not the first time that RBI governors and deputy governors are leaving. This has been going on for a long time. And this is a matter of concern, that you don't have people staying there long enough to own policy and to guide a ship for a longer distance. So you're basically fighting off, little people nitpicking on you, saying that, you don't know, you have no contact with the country, and you have not familiar with the country. Just because you went and did a PhD abroad for 5 years, you lost contact with the country. You don't know the country. The utter rubbish.
Right.
I think we should look at giving these people long-term tenures to get continuous policy here.
Okay, a long-term tenure will, many expected that to actually happen even with Raghuram Rajan, but it didn't happen. Mr. Ashwini Mahajan, do you agree? Because you seem to suggest that
no, that's what I was telling you. That's what I was telling you.
Yes.
That's what I was telling you. A tenured professor will never stay.
Correct.
I
take your point there, but let me.
A tenure in an American university is the best job in the world.
I take your point there. Let me come back to the larger point that you were making. Professor Agarwal, I'll come to you next, but I just wanted to ask Ashwini Mahajan that, because he seemed to suggest that, if you don't work with the government on these policies, then we rather not have you there. But if that is the case, then should we just have the government run the RBI? Why do we need experts running RBI any which ways as an autonomous body?
Precisely.
You see, I think perhaps I have been taken wrongly on this issue. I have already told you that we respect the institution, but at the same time, as a student of economics, I understand that monetary policy and fiscal policy go hand in hand with each other. And therefore, if RBI, in its obsession of being an autonomous body, which it is not, and working like this, not listening to the government's advice, not listening to the situations, and you see, I have so many things. You can, my other panelists can make these words like rubbish and other things, but let me tell you that this is economics, and when country needs a particular in a particular situation, we need to work together. Then RBI governor or the officials say, no, we are not going to listen to you. We will not pick up your phone even. So what does this mean? That shows that there is a kind of situation where government has to act and government has to work in accordance to the situation of the country, because it is the government which is to face the people of this country. For example, rate of interest should have been lowered, but because of their obsession for the, and my other panelist has also said, but because of the obsession for the wrong parameters taken, then they are not reducing the rate of interest. There was another situation during Raghuram Rajan tenure. We understand that rupee was getting better vis-a-vis other currencies, but Raghuram Rajan kept on saying that rupee is overvalued, whereas it was not, and foreign banks were making a good buck on that issue, and there are so many other situations where we understand that the people, that the situation is there, the economic situation is not well understood
Mr.
by
Mahajan,
the
RBI
foreigners.
is not supposed to be
by the people.
answerable to people. That's the government's job. RBI has its own job. And to sit here and question the intelligence of our RBI directors, our chief
They want
economic
the Supreme
advisors,
Court to be answerable to the government tomorrow.
for the want of
that
votes.
That is exactly what I'm saying. That is exactly what I'm saying. That RBI is not, whereas government is.
So
Therefore, government has to
is cutting the
find
interest
ways
rates
and
the
means
only way to boost the economy? The government has no other better ideas?
But rate of interest is when rate of interest could have been reduced, why they didn't do that? Why they didn't do that? So this is when exchange rate was to be improved. Why didn't they do that? So what I'm saying is that because of the fact, and my other panelists have said that they come, they don't have tenure. But I have seen people saying that we are losing jobs there, therefore we are shifting there. So what is this? So they don't have the commitment to the country, and they want to run the central bank of the country. I am amazed. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Aman Agarwal, I want to come to you. You wanted to make a point, but also this is the concern over here, that if you don't agree or toe the line of the government, then what's the point? Why are you there? Then we rather not have you there. India's central bank for now years and decades, has had the reputation that we've handled it so sensibly that we were immune to the entire crisis in 2008 because of the RBI's policies, because of the central bank's policies, and they didn't give in to political pressure at that point of time. Should we be giving into political pressure now for short-sighted vision of any government?
No, I think,
How can you say it's a short-sighted
one point I like to make,
because you are just saying, Mr. Mahajan, it's for answering the people of the country until you get elected again. It is short-sighted. That's not RBI's job.
No,
it's not short-sighted. It's the vision.
Please understand.
How can the vision of a particular person is better than the vision of the government?
Okay, go ahead, Professor Agarwal.
Yeah, you can continue.
No, I think, you see, both of them are independent institutions set up by different category of people. They need to work in tandem with each other, like the tires of a car work. If they don't work, then we are going to see a failure of a car not moving forward, and ultimately failure of a country. Firstly, which is a very important factor, is why are we getting down to individuals? It is an institution. RBI as an institution is very creditworthy and has remained a creditworthy institution from the very independence and the setup of RBI when we got independence and after that. So that credibility has not been lost, and it is not dependent on A person or B person or C person. Unfortunately, when I remember my colleague talked of Alan Greenspan, the Fed had become so resistant to Alan Greenspan that they were at one stage, one of the congressmen said that if he dies tomorrow, we will have to bring him from his grave and put him on the chair, because the United States of America can only be run by one person called Alan Greenspan. Are we looking at that kind of a stage? We are talking of institutions running, and there is no failure of institution running, and as a result, there should not be any debacle to the economic framework or the monetary policy framework which is there in existence. So, that is one part. Secondly, as I said, the differences are natural to happen. It is natural, and by normal course, differences between individual institutions will always occur. There would be debates about it. That doesn't mean one quits. It is Raghuram Rajan did not quit. Raghuram Rajan was ending a term, and he was appointed by the previous government. Everywhere around the world, top positions are vacated by people as soon as a new government comes in, whether it is United States, Europe, or any other part of the world. It's very few countries where we see that some of these institutions heads do not get replaced and they stay there for over a longer period. Very few of them. Out of about 200 plus countries, very one or two or three countries where they have had a long term. Rest of them always change. Now, if Raghuram Rajan's term was not ended, it was not abruptly ended. He was not given a renewal, and he also chose to move back. These are two different things, and we should not club Raghuram Rajan's exit as a cause of concern by any government per se. And now, that is something which is very critical, because your image which is being reflected shows time and again that Raghuram Rajan left or was removed, and I've talked about this. It is not the case.
That's exactly what it is.
Need to focus on
you and I can disagree on that.
Mirror Now is run by Times of India. It is the institution which is bringing the force to Mirror Now, not A person, B person, or C person in Times of India group or the Mirror Now.
But repeatedly, if people start leaving the Reserve Bank of India, it does end up denting the image of the Reserve Bank of India and this country, Professor Agarwal.
And bring things. But it is not going to demolish or finish off the institution.
Well, not if
because
one
it has its
person
own
leaves, but if
independent
3 people
credibility.
leave within
Now,
a
that's where I would like
time
to say
span of
the
3 years,
credibility
it's
is not in
different.
question here. Either Urjit or Viral leaving the place.
All right, completely out of time, so I'm going to thank all of our panelists for joining us. But here is how I see it. I think it is a cause of concern if so many senior economists, so many senior directors, and the RBI chief, as well as chief economists, start speaking out about the government's policies. Fact of the matter is that both Viral Acharya and the then RBI governor, Urjit Patel, had differences with the government. Now, differences have always been there. Since the time I have been covering business news, we've repeatedly seen standoffs between the RBI governors, RBI as an institution, and the government of this country. Because the government, the ministers will always have a political motive, will always want a certain things. But the RBI's job is not to answer the people of this country. The RBI's job is different and it's cut out, which is why it is important that it works independently, not thinking about political gains, not thinking about electoral results. If you start pressurizing the RBI to lend at a time, to go easy on banks at a time because you want the banks to lend to the corporates so that the economy restarts, well, the RBI may not be able to do a good job of regulating the banks and safeguarding their interests. If you pressurize the RBI repeatedly to cut interest rates without having a long-term view on what the impact of that may be on different things, the RBI will not be able to do its job, which is primarily to look out at the inflation trajectory. It's a long-standing battle that continues and has always happened. But we've never seen so many exits. We've never seen so many exits in such a short span of time, which is why questions are being raised if this is a concern. What I find also very intriguing is that the government is yet to take a decision and actually accept the resignation of Viral Acharya, even though it was submitted weeks ago. That was a very intriguing statement put out by the Reserve Bank of India. While the battle for autonomy continues for the Reserve Bank of India, one can now only hope that the individual that replaces Viral Acharya actually continues the job of an open and healthy discussion, even dissent if it is needed, a healthy debate about what the policy should be. And the decision which is taken is in the interest of this country, in the interest of our economy, and not just in the interest of a single person or a single government. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.